All right, guys, I want to give a massive thank you for all the support y'all have showed on the two videos a day. Yeah, I know we've been doing it. I'm saying that we're going to do it as long as y'all continue to show this level of support. We're getting over 100 likes a video. That's just unreal. I cannot thank y'all enough. Let's make sure we continue to do that, and I'll make sure I continue to get y'all 2 videos a day. In this video, Scott and I are going to talk about more rookie value. We're going to talk about a lot of CeeDee Lamb, a lot of Jerry Judy. Y'all are really going to like it. If y'all like this video, make sure you go down to the description. You're going to find Scott's podcast there. He has a Dynasty podcast and a High Stakes Redraft podcast. I'll make sure I indicate which one's which, and make sure you go over there, give them a listen. They're personally my favorite podcast to listen to, is why I love having Scott on the show. I personally think that he's probably the best Dynasty analyst that you'll ever be able to find. I don't think there's a better one. So thanks so much, guys, and hope y'all enjoyed the video. All right, Scott, the NFL draft is coming up soon enough. Really excited to watch it. It's going to be a different format this year. Don't think it really matters because I don't know about you, but for me, I don't really care about watching the players walk across the stage and meet Roger Goodell. I could care less about that. I just want to know where the players are going, what the teams are going to do, and I'm excited for it to happen. But let's talk about the 2 number 1 wide receivers in this class right now. Whether you have them 1 or 2, doesn't really matter. They're in their own tier. CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Judy. We're going to talk about how good they are, where we value them for Dynasty Fantasy Football. And do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so I think if you're talking about, it actually brings up the chat that was going on earlier in the Discord when someone had actually, not a question related necessarily to this video, but someone had asked me a question about Rashad Bateman. Would they value them, higher than some 2020 rookie receivers just because are they a higher pedigree? Where are they going to slot in? Would you rather have them because they could be a stud versus, just a decent receiver from this class? And my example was basically take the receiver in 2020 because you already know, or at least you have a much better idea what their draft capital is going to be. They've already gone through all of the testing. They've already gone through all the pre-draft stuff. So I think we can fairly safely assume that, Justin Jefferson's going to be a late first-round pick, or Henry Ruggs is going to be a first-round pick. Like, you already have a bird in the hand. So why would you take the risk of a guy who's still in college? You never know if he's going to come back for a senior year. He shouldn't, but you never know if he does. But then there's so much that can happen in a college season that could, even if it just tanks your draft stock a little bit, and you slide down to like being a late 2nd, early 3rd round pick. You'd much rather have the player this year, especially if you think they can potentially gain value and you can trade them back for next year for that same Devy player plus. So, that was the example. And my example that I used was, Jerry Judy has had this hype for 2 years. I mean, he was what everybody was talking about last offseason as like the Devy receiver that you need to get. And he still barely cracks, and it depends on what ADP you're looking at. I think the DLF April ADP just came out today, and Jerry Judy is at wide receiver 22. So he's still behind, guys that were 2nd-year players. He's clearly behind guys that are 3rd, 4th-year players. So, like, at best, he's like the ultimate example of where a rookie receiver that we don't know his landing spot can be before the NFL draft. So, just look at that. You're probably, even if you hit on the best Devy receiver, you might get a top 20 receiver entering the league. But that's basically your ceiling. So I think that kind of goes right into our discussion now. I mean, even if you think it's Lamb over Judy, it's hard for me to even consider one of those guys if, clearly you got to put him behind guys that are basically the same age or maybe 1 year older, like Juju Smith-Schuster or DJ Moore or DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, all those guys, clearly we've seen it from them. So you have to put them behind those guys. And then there's other players that have done it for multiple years. So it really comes down to, I think there's a few players in the top 20 that I think we could pick out that it would be a legitimate argument. So I'll throw those out to you. That's kind of where my head's going with this, is I'm taking everybody that's ahead of those rookies. And there's only a couple that I would say I would be interested, maybe not in trading them one by one, like straight up, but I would be totally fine with the idea of pivoting off some of these receivers for, one of these rookies, because I think the value gap's going to close pretty quickly. So I guess that's kind of the way that I'm thinking of it. I probably would say at least 17 of these receivers, I would clearly take over those guys, with only a couple of them being question marks. So does that kind of lead into your question?
Yeah, I have 2 main questions that stick out. One, I want to ask you about potential landing spots and what would be ideal. I kind of got into a video about that a couple days ago, but I think I had not a massive contrarian take, but I think I had a little bit different. of a take compared to most of these wide receiver landing spots. But first, let me ask you some specifics. These are the guys I'm interested in. So you said you would clearly have DK Metcalf over either one of the rookie wide receivers?
Yeah, I think I would. Yep.
Yeah. See, I had that same take, and I got asked that a couple weeks ago now, and asking, oh, why would you have DK Metcalf over Jerry Judy? Jerry Judy's ceiling is so much higher. And my argument was, is it really? DK Metcalf comes out, he really checks every single box, goes in and produces year one. So I think it's kind of silly to say that DK Metcalf's ceiling would be lower than either one of these rookie wide receivers, especially when he's tied to Russell Wilson. But I think it gets more interesting whenever you're looking at the guys that we know are in their prime right now, should be productive, but I don't know how much higher their value can go. I'm looking at a guy like Allen Robinson or a guy like Kenny Golladay. What are you thinking with those two productive wide receivers against the rookies?
Yeah, I mean, I think Golladay is probably at his ceiling from a value standpoint. He was a late breakout guy, came in the league at an older age. Like, I don't ever see him ascending into the top 10. I think he's probably maxed out where he is. Robinson's interesting because I think you could probably get Robinson for one of those rookies. You know, if you had the pick that likely Judy or Lamb's going to go in your draft, I think you'd have a legitimate chance to get Robinson, maybe even something small on top of it in that deal. So I actually think Robinson's a decent value where he is. But again, you know, you look at, do you see I see maybe a higher ceiling for Robinson to go up from here where he is versus Golladay. Like, Galladay's wide receiver 13 right now. I just don't see a way that he goes up from there. Whereas Robinson is wide receiver 20. I could write a story where Robinson goes up into the top 15. But I just think there's also so many receivers that are right around that range. I mean, I know you're big on Calvin Ridley. And then there's a couple others that are even a little bit lower. I'm really big on DJ Chark. I think he could be a volume monster this year. Maybe it's a lost season a little bit for Jacksonville, but you know, I think there's some players that could definitely creep into that range and push some of these guys that are in the teens out. So I would definitely take Golladay over the rookies, but I would certainly be looking to make that kind of pivot if I could. You know, if I could get Judy plus for Golladay, I would make that move.
Awesome. Well, let's jump in and talk about like what kind of is the ideal landing spot for these rookies. I was talking about it a couple days ago, and please let me know if I'm completely wrong here because I'm just thinking off the top of my head. But I'm kind of saying that I don't really care if they get paired up with a very good quarterback. I think with the kind of wide receivers they are, they don't need a super accurate quarterback that's going to be able to get the ball down the field. I want them to land on a team that has no established wide receiver one, just because we see across the NFL, there aren't that many wide receivers that are soaking up 25% of their team's targets. And I think that both CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Judy have that potential in them. And so I'm kind of looking at them going to a team like the New York Jets, the Oakland Raiders, and people maybe moving them down the boards if they land in those two spots just because they're poor offenses. But I would actually like those landing spots just because not only are they going to be able to step into a lot of targets year one, but I think their long-term potential is really it's extremely high due to their potential to get targets.
Yeah, I think that's I believe they pick 11th and 12th.
Yeah,
the Jets and the Raiders.
They're being mocked there a lot.
Yeah, that's almost a perfect landing spot for them. And then also I think San Francisco has the 13th pick, which is right after those two. So I think that's a range where you're going to see at least one of these guys come off the board. And then everyone has Henry Ruggs mocked to go to Denver at 15. So I don't see that there's a way that we get out of the top 15 without two receivers getting drafted. But I could also see, let me ask your thoughts on this, because I could also see one of those guys taking Ruggs over Judy or CeeDee Lamb. And I don't necessarily think that, like, I don't necessarily want someone like Ruggs going into a place where there's a ton of available targets in a certain offense.
Scott, I swear to God, if you watch my video, this is exactly what I talked about. I said that these two top wide receivers, I don't care about the quarterback play. I want them to step into a team that has a lot of targets available. But with Henry Ruggs, I don't care how many targets are available because he's never going to be a target hog. He's never going to get a high market share. He just has to be really efficient with the targets he gets, and he's going to have to land in a situation that has a very good quarterback.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think the biggest fear with someone like Ruggs is he ends up going to a place where at least maybe this will be a good thing if you were to draft him. But if he ends up going to a place with a ton of available targets, he's probably going to be somebody that's off my draft board because he's going to get moved up. Like, let's say he goes to the Jets at 11. I think there's a chance that he may get a lot of targets early on because they're available. But I think he's probably going to go at a higher point in rookie drafts than I'm willing to take him. I would much rather wait. So this is kind of where the discussion of, okay, say there's 6 receivers that go in the first round. How are you going to rank those guys? How much are you going to sway the landing spot and what's around them? Because we don't need, I think people use this, what are the available targets, as something that drives these wide receiver values too much. Ultimately, how much does available targets really matter from a standpoint of dynasty value? And then what's the production difference between the wide receiver 6 and the wide receiver 20? It's not that much. So unless you're talking about somebody that's going to take the leap to being a 160, 150, 160 target guy in the NFL, all I want is these guys to hit a threshold to where they're getting 110, 120. And then that's where you can let the efficiency of the quarterback and the talent take over. That's why I said DK Metcalf, because even if you say DK Metcalf's never going to get more than 110 targets, he's probably going to have 110 really, really good targets from Russell Wilson. So his 110 could be, 135 from another player. Plus, I think that sometimes we get way too short-sighted on the type of offenses these teams run. You look at Seattle. What if they have just like 2 years where they just go really pass heavy out of nowhere, because that's the way that the injuries on their team or their defense dictates that they play. We could see a massive jump up for a player because everything else is there except for the volume for somebody like Metcalf. So I think we're just short-sighted sometimes. And we look at, oh, well, he goes to the Jets. There's no targets there. It's a quarterback. But I think the value on a guy that goes to the Jets, it's going to be really interesting, because I've heard numerous podcasts talk about if a player goes to the Jets, they're going to immediately downgrade them.
Yeah. See, that's why I think that it's different for all these wide receivers, just because the different types of prototypes of the players. And I think we just have to look for the decent fit in the offense and see how they're going to interact with the players around them. So that's why I don't really have a set of rankings right now, just kind of have tiers and groupings of these players. And I really want to see how it plays out. Really looking forward to it.
Let me ask you this. A couple places, just we're talking landing spots. What will you do if there's a receiver that you like that slips to the Vikings? Will you push that player down just because of the offense that they run?
Honestly, yes. Like if Justin Jefferson, I think it's going to be a big difference. I actually saw a mock with him going to Philadelphia, which I think that would be a fantastic spot for Justin Jefferson. But he's a kind of wide receiver where I want him going to a pass-happy offense. I really do, just because I think that he is a guy that can get a lot of targets, playing in the slot, playing really anywhere on the field. But if he goes to a Minnesota Vikings compared to a Philadelphia Eagles, I think that's the difference for him being my wide receiver 3 and my wide receiver 6.
Yeah, and I've seen people mocking Justin Jefferson to New Orleans. I think he wouldn't get an immediate impact with Michael Thomas there either. It's like those 2 landing spots I think could be prime spots for a receiver, but those would definitely impact the rankings that I would have. I mean, another one, I don't necessarily buy this, but what if one of these guys went to Dallas? Like, what if Henry Ruggs went to Dallas?
Henry Ruggs, that one specific example, I would probably be all over Ruggs in that one situation, just because he's going in an offense that should be one of the best offenses in the league. And it's not like he's going to get his targets are going to be extremely efficient with Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup on the field. I would love that for the Dallas Cowboys. I think that would be good for every single player on the team.
Yeah, I mean, Henry Ruggs to Dallas, Henry Ruggs to Denver. I think those are 2 spots that definitely would be much better for the quarterbacks there. I mean, if Henry Ruggs went to Dallas, I would almost push Dak Prescott up to like number 3 quarterback in Dynasty. I mean, the weapons he would have around him would be ridiculous.
I think that's completely fair. With that locked-in contract, Dallas, he would, but most likely just because Dallas, I believe, actually led the league last offseason in yards per play run. And so I think Dak would be easily in the conversation for either quarterback 3 or quarterback 4 with Kyler Murray.
does San Francisco worry you as a landing spot for a player?
I would hate a San Francisco landing spot for pretty much any one of these wide receivers, because with Henry Ruggs, I don't think Jimmy G is going to be able to get him the ball downfield accurately. And with CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Judy, they're going to be going to an offense with Deebo Samuel, who's going to get his touches. I mean, they kind of scheme touches for him, and George Kittle will always be the number one player there. So I think San Francisco, Denver are really the only two landing spots for the top two wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Judy, where if they land there, I am drastically sliding them down my board.
And I think Baltimore would be another one that I wouldn't really want to see a receiver go to either, even if they have targets available. I just think both Baltimore and Tennessee are places I could see them mocking receivers as well.
Yeah.
But you just never know. I kind of hope that if you look at the second round, in a way, I kind of hope some of these guys fall to the early second round. You know, if you look at like the top, like a receiver that would go potentially to, obviously Miami has some potential open targets, but there's a couple other spots at the beginning of the second round that I think could be much better for some of these guys than the late first round. So I just think you have to be flexible with, where you're going to see these guys, because they're all going to go in the top 40, 45 picks. There's probably going to be 7 guys that go in that top 45 or so. So it really just is the landing spot's going to matter more for receivers this year. I wanted to ask you this because it was back to what my original discussion was going to be. If someone came to you today and was going to offer you your pick of any receiver in this draft for Beckham, would you do that?
Today, I would not do that. I would hold on to Odell. I could be biased there, but I just can't be confident that really over the next 3 years, any of these wide receivers surpass Odell in either fantasy points or value. Maybe if I had the landing spots in front of me, there would be a wide receiver that I would take over Odell. And I think that might be the case once we get into the NFL draft. But as of now, if I'm kind of going in blind, I would much rather have Odell, who I believe is probably more talented than any wide receiver in this class, even though he's in a poor situation and he's on the decline in his career, over any one of these rookie wide receivers.
Okay, so here's one. You're the best team in the league. You're coming off of a championship. Would you give Julio Jones for either one of these guys?
No, not a chance. Not a chance.
Keenan Allen.
Oh, definitely. Keenan Allen. I mean, Keenan Allen is on a sharp decline.
Okay. I mean, I think that's the move. That the Julio Jones one is great because he's still somehow maintained a top 12 ADP even after 31 years old, which is almost unheard of. Like normally you see a slide.
He has not fallen off at all.
I know, but that's the thing though. At any point, the value fall off could come. So it's almost like in 3 months, if one of these guys lands in a great spot, and I'll even say this: say you have your choice of either one of these guys after you see the draft capital, after you see the landing spot, are you still not giving Julio Jones for one of them? You get to pick anyone you want.
I'm still not giving up Julio. Julio's a different situation in my opinion. Just briefly talk on it, because if you at least, I know you had Jordan McNamara on your show a couple, like maybe a month or two ago, and he did the research where these wide receivers, they do fall off a cliff once they hit age 30, age 31. But the outliers of who don't do that are the players who come in with complete profiles, check every single box, and are elite prospects. And that is the definition of Julio Jones. And I think Julio Jones hasn't fallen off anytime soon. He also has Matt Ryan tied to him. So he's just such a stable asset in my opinion, where I think we're going to see multiple years of Julio Jones as a top option.
Well, I think this just speaks to, regardless of how great of a prospect a receiver is, this just speaks to that there is some question marks for any rookie receiver that comes into the league. Because I'm basically saying, I'll give you the best rookie receiver this year for Julio Jones. Because even if you get 2 more really, really elite years of Julio Jones production, at some point the value is going to drop off. Even if the production doesn't drop off, the value is. So
his value will never be higher.
What it comes down to is, regardless of how good of a prospect it is, you're still not willing to do that move straight up, even if there's a really good chance that you have the higher value player next year. I mean, because if one of these rookies comes in and just has a wide receiver 2 season, someone like Judy's already going to be a top 15 valued receiver next year, automatically. you know, he's going to rise up in the rankings just based on like what Metcalf and AJ Brown have this year. If he just does something close to what they did, he'll be in the top 12 to 15 next year. So he'll be at Julio Jones's level next year, but you still wouldn't give it up for the production. I mean, I think that's an interesting question.